I'm Francis Sealey from GlobalNet21 and Enfield Voices. And I'm hoping you're seeing this. We've had a bit of trouble today in getting this interview that we're doing together. So I hope you can see it. I can see on my broadcast it's streaming okay, so that makes me happy. I had trouble with Zoom this morning. It wouldn't stream to Facebook, so we're doing this on a different platform called Be Live. And we've got Clare Rogers with me, who you should be able to see. She's there with me at the moment, and I'll introduce her in a sec. And I hope you hear the sound okay. Let me know if there are any problems. These are the interviews that we're planning to do quite regularly, where we interview people who are making a difference in our community. We're doing one next week. We did one last week, and this is our second one. And Clare is involved in the Better Streets campaign in Enfield, and we're going to talk to her about that and what happened. So let me start with you, Clare. And if I can ask you, really, how you got it going. I mean, you must have had a background that made you really, really interested in this. So tell us a bit about your background and what led you towards the campaign.
Well, it's an interesting story. I've had quite a long sort of a journey over 2 or 3 years, I'd say, of just becoming really passionate about streets and how we use them. And it really started with starting a play street. So we've got a play street on my street in Palmer's Green, when we close the roads to traffic for 3 hours a month and let the children play and neighbours meet and chat. And it was a real eye-opener as to how the difference between when traffic has stopped and people can come out and meet each other and community can form. And it just opened my eyes to how much we've lost, really, in modern streets in the UK by having too much traffic, having too many cars, dividing communities, stopping kids getting out and enjoying their freedom. So that to me was one catalyst, and there were several others. Air pollution was a big trigger for me. I don't know if you remember when the statistics started to come out. 9,500 Londoners dying every year prematurely. It just that really shocked me, and I started to see that there's just a lot of harm in the way we manage our streets and manage traffic in this country. And
so did that make you feel that you wanted to do something right there? At what point did you have the eureka moment and you said, right, I'm going to do something?
The eureka moment was on the North Circular. Heading to, so my road to Damascus was actually the A406. I was heading to IKEA on a beautiful sunny morning, and I just heard the statistics about air pollution being linked to deaths in London. And on my right, I could see London laid out below me with this horrible brown haze covering it. And so that, for me, that moment was like, well, I don't want to be part of this anymore. And I was at that time driving my children to school every day in Southgate. And which has got a perfectly good bus route, and I thought I don't want to be part of this anymore. I want to live differently and to try not to use my car, as little as possible. So that was a real turning point.
So what did you actually do when you decided that you actually wanted to go ahead and do something to change everything and make things better for people?
Well, the first thing was my own lifestyle, and I did an experiment for a week to see how can I get around with 2 young children in this outer London suburb without a car, just for a week. I just tried it for a week, and it was really interesting to discover that there were so many other ways of getting around routes I haven't considered, public transport options I haven't considered, leaving it longer and walking instead. And it made me realise that I just defaulted to the car without really considering the impact, considering the alternatives. So that was the first thing I did, was to work on myself. But then obviously the other big thing that was happening at that time was the Mini Holland bid, which we just won. And that was another big catalyst for me. And I wanted to get in there and support that.
So okay, you wanted to support it, and when you say you wanted to support it, I mean, what did you actually do? What made you so active? Because you're a central figure everyone knows in the Safer Streets and Better Streets campaign. They know your name. How did you get involved? What did you actually do? What was the next step?
Well, none of it was very intentional. I'd actually joined. I'd accidentally become a cyclist because in my efforts not to use a car to get to school, I'd done some research and gone out and bought a tandem. And so myself and my younger daughter would travel by tandem every day. I was like, oh, I'm a cyclist now. Mini Holland is coming, so I'd better join London Cycling Campaign. And I started going to the Enfield branch meetings, Enfield Cycling Campaign. And of course, that was the main thing on the agenda, was how can we support the Mini Hollands? But of course, we were a group of about 4 or 5 people. And what we'd encountered, of course, was this kind of wall of hostility from these very hostile voices from the public saying, we don't want it. And that was where it really got going. And that was kind of what galvanized many of us to support it. And what that led to was Facebook was a big factor, because someone, not me, started a Facebook page supporting the Mini Hollands. And all sorts of people began to pile on there who weren't cyclists, who weren't cycle campaigners. They just wanted less traffic. They wanted their kids to be able to walk to school. They were worried about air pollution. They wanted nicer high streets. So all sorts of interests. And they were all, concerned about the opposition to the Mini Holland, concerned that we'd lose the funding. And so as Enfield Cycling Campaign and all of these kind of wider people, we formed our first meeting and called ourselves Better Streets for Enfield.
So how many people get together to get involved in this?
So at that, sorry, did you say how many people?
Yeah, I mean, how many people were involved?
So our first meeting we had at King's Head, sorry about the shape, King's Head in Enfield Town. I think there were only about 20 people in the room, 10 of our cycle campaigners, 10 what I call normal people. But from there, we've grown to a Facebook group with nearly 800 and others who are not on Facebook who support us as well.
Okay, but I mean, when you say you've got 800 in the Facebook group, have you got a really active group that really, campaigns and does things every week? Have you got something with a lot of momentum going?
Yeah, it feels like it to me. It feels like, what we mainly do is we have a voice. So whether it's writing into the local press or turning up to things or organising events, there does seem to be a very kind of active presence. It's certainly not all me. I'm probably the one that kind of gobs the most, but it's not just me.
Well, yeah, there always has to be someone who's a pusher, who's a catalyst in an organisation, and you clearly do that very well. I mean, you've called it the Better Streets campaign, but of course, Mini Holland has become a focal point in the last couple of years or so, with a lot of controversy around it. But the Better Streets campaign is more than that, isn't it? Tell us what the Better Streets campaign is, because it's much wider than just the cycle lanes.
Yes, it is. Although, so Mini Holland obviously became Cycle Enfield in this borough, and that's always been, I think the council will agree with me on this, it's always been a bit of a misnomer, because it really isn't just about cycling. Everyone focuses on the cycle lanes, but the way we see it, that done properly, it's about regenerating high streets, and it's about getting people to drive less and to walk and cycle more. And what's interesting, a recent report by Rachel Aldred at the University of Westminster shows that in all the Mini Holland boroughs, especially those where the most work has been done, there's more walking going on. There's been a huge increase in walking, not just in cycling. So that's really interesting. But we support that, and it's not just about cycling. And we also support things like we want to see more 20 miles per hour. So we're very delighted by the Mayor's announcement yesterday, rolling out more of those zones. We want to see things like school streets, where there's a times traffic ban and parents are unable to drive onto streets at school run hours. We want to see, I want to see things like car clubs, because they've shown that if you have an area with good car club provision, fewer people own cars and fewer miles are driven. So we're just passionate about reclaiming streets from traffic and giving it back to people. So that covers a lot of different areas.
I mean, so do you link up with other groups? You mentioned car sharing and car groups and so on. So do you try and encourage that by linking up with a car sharing group or some sort of cooperative and putting people in touch with that? Do you act as a sort of contact point and network as well?
Well, that I wish I had the time for something like that. It's more that we're saying to the council we would like you to allow more and encourage more car clubs like Zipcar and Drive Now, which is actually a BMW company. So there's different models of car sharing, but it wouldn't be necessarily organised by residents themselves. I've got friends who live in Haringey, and they just are like, well, why would we own a car when we've got 3 schemes, 5 minutes walk, 3 parking spots, 5 minutes walk from our home? It's not cost effective to own a car, so we'll just belong to a car club.
Yeah, I mean, that makes some people ask the question that when you say better streets, the question rises, better streets for who? Because the car owner might say it's not a better street for us. So really there's a question mark at the end of better streets, isn't there?
I think I don't see people as cyclists and drivers and bus passengers. We see people as people. And this is why we're trying to say about Cycle Enfield, it's not a bike conversation, it's a people conversation. And whether you own a car or not, you still probably walk, and you could still probably get the train, and you might even cycle. So it's not about, is it better for drivers? It's about, is it better for people who own a car, as well as people who don't own a car? It's about making it better for people. And the thing, what's really made me passionate about the problem with our streets at the moment in this country is that it's a case of real social injustice. It's the traffic domination that we're suffering from affects people who are poorer far, far more than people who are more affluent. So you're more likely to live somewhere where you get more air pollution in your lungs, and you're more likely to be killed by a car if you're less well off. And I just think that's unfair. So this is about what's better for people.
So what do you say to a car owner who comes up to you and say, well, what is there in this for me? I mean, I need my car every day, just convince me.
I'm a car owner as well. I own a diesel Volkswagen, I'm ashamed to say. And the statistics show that if you own a car, for instance, you're 2 to 3 times less likely to get the daily exercise that you need. So if you own a car, you just use it carefully. Think about the alternatives. Are you really using it when you absolutely have to, or is it just you've gone into the default, like I always used to, the default of there's my car, I'll jump in and drive. I think a lot of us at Better Streets are, we're still car owners, but we're just more thoughtful about how we drive, how we travel. And I think that's good advice. So for some people, they have to drive every day for work, and there's just nothing they can do about that. And I've got great sympathy for that. But it's, what other journeys could they make by other modes?
So what techniques have you used to put your idea across and get people on board? For example, I see that you've had a Better Streets pledge. Is that still operational, and who would have pledged to try and make our streets better?
Yes, that's something we discussed, and it's on the back burner. It's been difficult to find the time. It's something I'd really love to make really public. It would actually be a better travel pledge, where people can pledge to basically drive less and travel more actively, whether that's swapping one car journey for a bus journey, for instance. But we haven't had time to roll that out. A lot of our time is going into Cycle Enfield as each scheme is rolled out. We're involved in there because, as well as supporting the council, we're holding the council to account. So if a new design comes out, as one did the other day in the Hazelbury neighbourhoods in Edmonton, then we want to be all over that design, saying, how could it be better? Have you thought about this? What about that? And that does take up a fair amount of our time. But we're going to be at a Palmer's Green Festival. This is Better Streets for Enfield and Enfield Cycling Campaign, with a whole array of bicycles to try out for the public. It's the 3rd year we've done this. They're all completely free, and this is like the biggest array we've ever had. And we're really focusing on parents and people with disabilities to say, look, there is another way other than driving to get around, to get your kids around. And that's a lot of fun, and it does raise our profile as well.
I mean, the Palmer's Green Festival is actually on September the 2nd, isn't it? So you'll have a really big input there. And what would you hope to get out of that? What would be, the sort of impact of that you would love to be able to say you've achieved?
I mean, we've already had an impact. People come away, the word they often use coming away from that event is inspired, as well as having had a lot of fun. So what I'd hope is that people come away inspired again to imagine their life with less car in it and more using a bicycle. So it's not often you get the chance to try out a cargo bike, for instance. A cargo bike is like a box bike, and you seat your children in the front. Or try out a trike. People who are nervous of cycling a bicycle, or maybe not great balance or not great mobility, a trike is a real eye-opener for them. And using a tandem, that's really great for families. It's great for people who are partially sighted. So I just would hope people will come away thinking, actually, maybe I can ride a bike. I didn't think I could, maybe I can. And maybe that can replace some of my car journeys. That's what I'd hope for.
Okay, so you're talking about what you're doing at the festival and bikes, but we've got a question here from Mark Fisher, who's talking up on behalf of the pedestrian. There's often this conflict between car and bikes, and then bikes and pedestrian, and it's always a real to and fro. It's a problem. And he's saying, what's in your campaign for pedestrians when all the bus stops and zebra crossings that he thinks are necessary are being removed? He feels that maybe bicycles are gained by it, but pedestrians are suffering a little bit.
I think there's a little bit of truth in that. I think there are areas where we're not happy with pedestrian crossings where there have been signs. To be fair, part of that is UK traffic regulations. It's not actually the fault of the Cycle Enfield scheme. Traffic regulations really don't help with junctions, and I'm not sure I can explain it well enough. I don't have a good enough grasp of it because it's extremely complicated. But if you go to Spain, you'll see they've got zebra crossings listed everywhere, and that's fine. And that's what I would like to see more of. I'd like to see more priority for pedestrians with things like zebra crossings, mini zebra crossings, and traffic regs just don't help with that. But we are on at the council about things like Winchmore Hill Town Centre. We'd like to see a dropped curve, pedestrians crossing Ford's Grove, for instance. So there are things that need ironing out. So we'd like to see shorter delays when you press a button at the pedestrian crossing. We'd like that to go green within 7 seconds. Things like that we really think should change. And what always comes up is yes, but the traffic flow. And there's this constant, TfL, Transport for London, and the council trying to balance the needs of traffic flow. But we think pedestrians should have more priority. On the other hand, I would say I think there has been an improvement for pedestrians with the Cycle Enfield scheme. For instance, disabled passengers getting off buses, that's much easier. We've heard from wheelchair users, it's much easier with the bus boarders. And I've heard from people that it's just much nicer walking on the pavement because you've got the cycle lane acting as a buffer between you and the traffic. So it swings and roundabouts, but we need that swing away from traffic having so much priority, and that should benefit pedestrians as well. Okay,
so who are you trying to convince in your campaign? Is it the general public, citizens? Is it local authorities and councillors? Or is it government? And how do you sort of focus your campaign? Do you aim at all three, and how do you do that?
So in my mind, it is aimed at all three. So at a local level, other residents, we want to see them being travelling more responsibly, using cars less. For the council, on the one hand, we are cheerleaders in a way because we think they've been very brave to put in the scheme that they have in the face of all that opposition. So we're cheerleading for them, but as I also say, we're also holding them to account. And there are areas where we would like them to be more radical, especially in residential neighbourhoods. And I can come on to that in a minute. In terms of government, it's harder to have an impact at every level. But we are signing petitions for Department of Transport and also the Mayor of London. So I guess it is every level.
Okay, so the trouble is a lot of this conversation has been around bus stops, pedestrians and bicycles. And we started off by saying the Better Streets campaign is more than that, but we haven't talked about the more yet. I mean, what are you doing, for example, about litter, about waste, about building communities, about having street parties? Do you spend as much time thinking about those things as you do about bicycles?
there are people in the group who are much passionate about litter than I am, and about planting, about greening our high streets and greening our residential neighbourhoods. So to come onto residential neighbourhoods, something we feel really strongly about is that we want the quieter neighbourhood scheme that the council is already designing to become much stronger, actually removing rat running traffic, because we feel that it's not pushed that hard enough at the moment. And we really inspired by Waltham Forest, where they've created what's called low traffic neighbourhoods that actually make it impossible for drivers to rat run through a neighbourhood. Everyone can access their own street by car, but no one can get through. And we think that's, the whole country needs that, but it's desperately needed in Enfield. And where you put those in, as we've seen, I've been to Waltham Forest now 5 or 6 times and looked around those neighbourhoods, and it's absolutely dramatic. And it affects all the things that you've talked about. There is less litter, there's people taking more pride in their front gardens, for instance. Children have got their freedom back because there's no rat running traffic, mowing them down. It's really needed. And street parties, for instance, you wouldn't have to go through all the hurdles of managing traffic, because your street is already low in traffic. So it's benefited community, it's benefited children, it's benefited the elderly who can cross their own roads without fear, and it's brought together people to do planting on their own streets, for instance. So it's really it's amazing when you deal with the traffic, and we do focus on traffic a lot. If you deal with the traffic and reduce it in those neighbourhoods, it has all these amazing knock-on positive benefits.
Yeah, I can see that. I noticed so. I think it's on your website. Tell me if I'm wrong and I watched the wrong website. But I think you have a lady from Winchmore Hill who is very passionate about waste.
Yes, that's right.
So are you doing anything about that? Or are you just putting that up and fly posting it on your website? Is that part of your campaign?
That's more, I feel like if I personally focus on that as well, and I personally feel very strongly about plastic waste, there's not enough space in my head to focus on that as well. But by putting it on, by highlighting her campaign on Better Streets, we're hoping that others will pick that up and run with it.
Have they done that yet? Are they running with it, or is that work in progress and still to be done?
I think because she's based in Winchmore Hill, it's very much an N21 focused campaign. There have been others in Winchmore Hill, like Maggie Westhead, who actually wrote that article on our website, is a big supporter, and she was part of the day that they took waste back to Sainsbury's and presented it to the manager. She was involved in that. So yeah, it's something we try and promote and support.
Yeah. Okay. There's a little debate going on the Facebook chat about bus stops and walking, but I think I know you said that you're doing everything you can to try and make that better, because it's not as good as it should be. You did mention about friendly neighbourhoods,
and I wouldn't say that the bus stops. I know the bus stops are really controversial, but there's actually an article. If you go onto Better Streets for Enfield, our website, you'll see a post called Bus Stop Borders and Orcas, Are They Dangerous? And that will give you the full answer, because we do think that in the space available, the bus stop border arrangement is probably the best that they could have come up with. And throughout Denmark, interestingly, that's kind of the standard practice. And Transport for London and experts they called in spent weeks and weeks and weeks analysing all the data from Denmark and from other places, and they said, well, actually, we think this is the safest solution for bus stops, for cycling and passengers at bus stops. So,
okay.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Mark Fisher says that he knows a person on your website. I think she's called Clare Hill, and that he's worked with her, and he's just come back, he says, from Sainsbury having a rant about plastic. So,
yes, he's spearheading that campaign in Winchmore Hill, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, you talk about working with other people in other groups. So do you work with friendly neighbourhood groups, and do you get involved in the design and working with the local authority about designing neighbourhood plans so that it meets your objectives?
Well, yeah, we're having a conversation with them, and don't forget that we've all got other jobs and we're all doing this as volunteers on our own time. But as much as possible, we're going along to ward forums and we're getting very involved in each new consultation as it comes up. And something we're focusing on a lot at the moment is the area where I live, the Fox Lane area neighbourhood in Palmer's Green. And because that's the most sort of comprehensive, quieter neighbourhood design so far, we are saying to the council, why don't we trial this when it's done, and then why don't we trial it as an actual low traffic neighbourhood that removes rat running completely, removes through traffic completely. And we just feel that would be the best area to focus on. So we are in talks with lots of councillors about that, about making that happen.
And what's the result of that? Are you getting support, or are you getting stalling, or are you getting support but they're saying, I don't know if we can do anything about it?
We're getting some positive noises. So I presented on this at the Fox Lane District Residents Association at their last meeting. And interestingly, no resident said, no, we don't want this. Everyone was like, yeah, there's too much traffic on our streets. And Councillor Anderson stood up and said he's very willing to trial anything really that will make a difference. So it was good to have his on that.
Okay, I'm going to ask you how people can get involved in a minute, but I'm going to get Mark Fisher on again, because he says you're still not talking about bus stops removed in Palmer's Green and Winchmore Hill, so he feels strongly about that. But can you reassure him you're doing your best on that?
I think a lot of the placement of the bus stops was around trying to keep as much parking on the high street as possible. So that, you know, that was a compromise that was made, as far as I can understand, and that's a shame. I think the placement of bus stops is more important than private cars getting a space to park. In Palmer's Green, where we have a perfectly adequate massive car park just round the corner, so you know that was a compromise that was made because a lot of people were saying we want parking on the high street.
Yep. And Carol Fisher is saying, do you have a view on introducing water fountains to reduce litter?
Oh, I would like to hear more about that. I have no idea.
No, I don't either. Maybe Carol, I mean, we don't have time to do it now, we're coming to the end, but maybe Carol, you could write to Claire or tell her a bit more about your ideas around that, and she could take it forward. You know, we've got 2 or 3 minutes left, so maybe you could tell us, Claire, you know, if people are really interested in what you're doing, and I'm sure there are lots of people who are, because, you know, your campaign's been big, it's been in the news, people know about it, you've engaged councillors. Now, if they wanted to get involved, what's the best way for them to do it?
If I've got time to say, you warned me about this question, so if I've got time to say 3 quick points. The first one is I'd really urge people to think about their own personal travel, and I say they have got to focus on traffic. Think about, you know, are you stuck in traffic or are you traffic? There's a great poster that says that at Walton Forest. So just think about, you know, could you travel in another way? That's always a good place to start. Secondly, think about your own streets. Is there something you could do on there? Could you have a street party? Street party fees are waived once a year by the council if you do it in June on certain dates. And that's a really good way of getting your street together, your community, forming a community on your streets, and seeing what your street is like with no traffic on it, which is always a big eye-opener. Another thing to try is a play street, which is a monthly closure. And if you say you're on a bus route and you can't do that, then there are other options. You'd have to message me and I can give you some other ideas for still forming community out on your street meets and chalking out and ideas like that. And I would also say join a campaign. You're very, very welcome to join Better Streets for Enfield on Facebook. We've also, if you're not on Facebook, we've got a website. You can click on there and get our email newsletter. But there are lots of organisations out there that are doing similar things to us. So London Cycling Campaign actually isn't just about cycling, it is about reducing traffic on our streets. Living Streets, which was originally for pedestrians, is now working with London Cycling Campaign to reduce traffic on our streets. And I can't think of any off the top of my head. Oh, the Campaign for Better Transport is a really interesting one with great ideas that deserves support. So I do urge anyone to become a member of one of those organisations and support them.
And if they didn't get all that down, is there one point of contact they could get hold of who they could get that advice from?
I shall have to write a blog and put it on our website. Actually, no, we probably will put a page up summarising that, so yes. So betterstreets.co.uk is the place to go.
Okay, all right. We'll come to the end of the half an hour. So thanks, Claire, for doing that. I mean, it's really good, and we could have gone on for a long time. Mark is still asking questions about crime and so on. And we won't go into that now because we don't have time. But Mark, we are going to do other interviews, and a lot of it, some of it will be on community safety, so don't worry, we'll be covering that. We'll be doing another one next week. I don't know whether it be through our Zoom webinar system or through this Be Live system, but we're going to talk about the Pollens Green Festival next week, and we've got Carl Brown, who's on the organising committee of that, who's going to tell us about what's happening there. But anyhow, thank you for doing this, Claire. This is the second one. We had a bit of a hitch this morning, but we managed to get it. You know, it doesn't matter how the show starts, it's how it finishes that matters. And we finished it okay, so thank you. And, you know, we'll end this interview now. So thank you all for joining us, those who have, and thank you, Claire.
Thank you.